Benjamin Barker!
The whole thing has a kind of destiny, I find, that how this has come to be. I remember when I first got together with Tim, he was talking about it and saying that he'd been marinating this idea of the musical. And it was one of our talking points. We got something in common. We both love Sweeney Todd, you know. And that's about it, though. After this film, that's it. We do have a child, yes.
Tim Burton actually had come to me about 20 years ago. He was a big fan of the piece. He'd seen it in London. It was not a success in London the first go-round. It has been since, but the very first time it was done in London, they didn't like it. And yet he saw 12 performances, I believe.
I think it was like the late 70s, 1980. It was the London production, and the emotion was so strong, and the humor and the graphicness of it. I knew that when I first saw it, that it just struck me as something really strong and something I really could relate to.
I'm a big movie fan, and no musical of anything I've written has ever satisfied me. And I thought, here's a chance to try again.
At last, my arm is complete again.
Tim is an auteur, he's a visionary, and he takes chances that most directors are fearful of. And this is a musical, which he's never done before. Either have I been, as a producer, been involved with a musical. So it's very challenging.
A barber, you say? Take me to him.
As always with anything that I end up doing with Tim, the initial attraction is really Tim more than anything else. The singing, you know, was a real challenge. I mean, there was a real opportunity to fall flat on your face. Still is.
Your hair's rather nice.
It's for a price.
Order something else there to follow, since no one should swallow it twice.
If you're going to learn to sing and you're going to do your first musical, it's really stupid to do Mrs. Lovett. Sondheim, he had casting approval over this part. It's easily the most complicated part in the musical. That's what I've been told independently by Sondheim. Because I've been reared on it, it's like my milk, because I haven't sung before. I think it's quite normal.
It has to be grosser, it's green.
Pretty good, John.
I've always been a fanatic of Sondheim, and I've always also wanted to be in a musical. I mean, as soon as I popped out of the womb, I wanted to be in a musical, but I never thought I could sing except in the bathroom. Mrs. Lovett, I wanted to be her since I was 11, and I went around apparently in Mrs. Lovett hairdos.
That's good. That's good. What you're doing is better than you think, so just say it.
Mum and Dad were big fans, and they brought back the score, and I remember sitting in my drawing room, looking at the score, going through the lyrics and listening to it on the record, and I just got completely hooked on the music.
Now it has to be grosser, it's green.
In the Broadway show, that was almost more the Mrs. Lovett show in a certain way, because that was musically the one that people gravitated toward. So there was a shift in that, because it's like we're going slightly more internal with it. It just sort of shifts what the tone of the piece is. But the thing that remains the same is that it's got to be somebody who basically has the same quality that Johnny does in a different way.
What is that?
It's for...
I knew who was going to direct it, and I also was desperate for my little 11-year-old self inside, that I would give myself the chance to audition. And we had a discussion, and he said, you know, I respect you as an actress, but, you know, it's a singing part. You've never sung, so... But I said, look, it doesn't matter. Look, let me just learn how to sing. Whether I get it or not, it doesn't matter. I've just always wanted to do it. I went to this great singing teacher who is a wizard. He's called Ian Adam. We had 3 months. I said, let's just try. And I really have worked my arse or ass off.
I'll come again when you have Judge on the menu.
It took a long time. You know, at the end of it all, I knew she was really right for it. It was funny because I did a drawing a long time ago, and I mean, all my drawings look the same, but I looked back at it later and I realized it was Johnny and it was her. There was a certain thing about it that just kind of shocked me into thinking, wow, it is them. And so got them together and looked at them together, and they just had that quality of a weird couple.
Tim always wanted a sort of like silent movie star look for both of us. So we've both got very, very pale skin and then rather dark sunken eyes, a bit like how Tim looks. You know, his usual sort of aesthetic. He loves pale, dark, sunken eyes, and because he's an insomniac, I think that's where it comes from. There's a lot of autobiography in there, but even it's completely unconscious. He's so not a narcissist, but it always ends up being somehow a version of himself. He'll hate me saying that, but fuck it.
My relationship with Tim it's family. I somehow know how he works, how he ticks, and certainly, you know, he knows me pretty much better than anyone. We did our first movie together like 17 years ago, man. You know, see, almost don't want to even question like what is it? You know, I just know that it is, and that's kind of what's important.
I've worked with Johnny so many times, and I think this is definitely one of my favorite characters because, you know, we've always talked about old horror movies, and the idea of kind of being able to create something like that and seeing Johnny play like a, you know, like a monster in a way is fantastic.
Yeah. I think the more creamy, more it helps. And is it still easy to get on, Johnny?
Yeah, I mean, it's done pretty well.
I've always admired Johnny, as most people do, because of his choices as an actor. Because he's always done things according to his own likes. He's never done anything according to any sort of pattern or formula or any, you know, eye for creating a career or any reliance on his looks. I think in a funny way we're a bit similar in that way, in that we don't have much respect for what we look like, and we rather like camouflaging ourselves and getting away from ourselves. I know we both are allergic to watching ourselves, so it's sort of in a way a bit of a similar dynamic.
38 sugar, take 3.
What may I do for you today, sir? Stylish trimming of the hair. Soothing skin massage. Sit, sir. Sit.
You see, sir, a man infatuated with love.
I often thought of him during the filming of this, thinking he's got the perfect job. He doesn't have to say much. He just stares and broods and doesn't have much dialogue. I wish I could have that job. But he did have to sing, so that sort of balanced the whole thing out.
The closest I ever gave. I remember, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe, Tim came to visit us at our house, and he brought me like a CD of Sweeney Todd, you know, the Angela Lansbury, you know, stuff, and he brought it and said, you know, I don't know if you ever heard this, give it a listen, you know. I was, you know, okay, gave it a listen, thought, wow, that's interesting. And then, you know, whatever, you know, 5, 6 years later, you know, the question comes, hey, what do you think, you know, you think you can sing? You know?
Richard and I were talking one day, and this was after probably maybe a couple months, and like, you know, I mean, I was comfortable. I knew he could do it, but nobody had heard, and so we just had this fantasy of like, you know, he starts singing, and it's like, oh my God, what the hell is that?
We're here at the studio. Sets were being constructed. Wardrobe was being made. Other actors and commitments were being made. Studio, literally, we were spending millions of dollars on the picture. Not one person on earth had heard Johnny sing. And he's the star of the picture.
38's Romeo, take 1.
You're in a merry mood today, Mr. John.
Your delights are catching fire from one man to the next.